Hey there, I'm Maddie Gardner coming to you from the WBTV News Now desk on Monday, January 17th, right here on WBTV News. We are airing a 1-hour Atrium Health MLK Jr. Holiday Celebration special. It is hosted by Dedrick Russell and Steve Crump, and so I sat down with them earlier this week to get an idea of what we can expect to see in that 1-hour special that is airing on the holiday Monday, January 17th. It was a long, in-depth conversation about what's coming up, so we are going to play part of that conversation for you now. First, let's talk about what people can expect to see on January 17th with this special.
Well, I guess they can expect to see an informative piece that tells it like it is. And they can expect it's for the whole family. And what I love about this piece is that this crosses all generations. You know, we have young people to people of different ages and how King impacted them right where they are, and how the work is still not done. There's still more work to be done. And this piece shows that if everybody puts in the work and does what they're supposed to do, then we can cross the finish line much sooner rather than later. And I love it that that Steve Crump, who is a veteran journalist here at WBTV and is known throughout the country. I'm so glad that he went through the portals of time and dug in and just saw how King impacted the Carolinas, and that is just a good piece that he put together. And Crump, why don't you tell people about how King impacted not only the people in the Carolinas, but Carolina as the state as a whole?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, when you look at the relevance of Martin Luther King Jr., people think of things such as the Montgomery bus boycotts, the sanitation worker strike in Memphis, even the March on Washington. But the reality is he started coming to the Carolinas back in the 1950s, and we showcase that in the earlier piece, the very first piece that you'll see in the special, where he ends up addressing a group of students at Bennett College, the female college up in Greensboro, back in 1958. There would be subsequent visits to the Carolinas, to Charlotte, to Johnson C. Smith University here in Charlotte as well. And there's one thing that's rather telling in all of that, and it's something that I stumbled upon many years ago. But on the day that he was assassinated in Memphis back on April 4th of 1968, he was supposed to have been here in Charlotte dealing with some of the local civil rights activists. Instead, he sends a telegram to Dr. Reginald Hawkins, who was a well-known activist and dentist in this community, saying, hey guys, I got to stay back in Memphis, work with the sanitation workers. And several hours later, he ended up dying.
And you're uncovering so many different facts and truths in this special. I think it's important to talk about what you found most interesting coming from so much experience in the journalism field.
I think in many regards, as much as it's a look back, and Dedrick alluded to this, but I think it's also describing where we are. For an example, you know, in this piece, you will hear from people that are part of the LGBTQ community. There are a number of issues that are raised in the 21st century as it relates to civil rights and social justice that didn't necessarily come up in the 20th century. So, you know, we kind of bring it forward in that regard, but also, you know, some of the issues haven't gone away, especially as we see concerns as it relates to voting rights and civil rights, police brutality, issues of, you know, economics and the like. So in that regard, I think in some respects, this speaks to a continuum as far as the issues that are in front of us as a community.
And I guess for me, what I've learned is that I guess sitting in the room in this space that we're in Charlotte, we have a lot of African-American leaders, right? We have a Black mayor, we have a Black superintendent, we have a Black sheriff, we have a Black police chief, we have a Black city manager, we have a Black who is president and CEO of Atrium Health. We also have a Black district attorney, and right now, history, we have a Black medical health director here in Mecklenburg County. And so in this piece, we sat down with the mayor, the superintendent, the DA, and someone with Atrium Health about talking about the significance and the impact to have African-American leaders in position on this King holiday. And we had a frank and candid conversation with them. You know, I asked them questions, even in 2022 and in the 21st century, are they still getting hate mail because of the color of their skin? And they said, yes, they still get hate mail. And the DA said that he doesn't get mail, but they talk to him in his face. And they tell him, you know, about what he is not doing and things like that. And I guess the interesting thing is that when the mayor, you know, we also talked about what King said about leadership. It is not how you stand in the moments of convenience. And I'm paraphrasing here. It does not matter how you stand in the moments of convenience and when things are going well, but how do you stand in moments of challenge and controversy? And I asked that question to the leaders, and the mayor, she said that, you know, during George Floyd, you know, a lot of people criticized leadership about how things were going. And so she said that she appreciated that criticism. And she said that during that time, that it was more important for leaders to do listening opposed to action. And so she said, sometimes, you know, as leaders, you have to listen to your people and let them hear and let them vent about what they're trying to get out. So that was because we're always thinking about Black leaders have to do, but sometimes they're not listening to their constituents and to the voters. And so when she said that you know, just took me to a new level, that said that, hey, it's not so much in the action, but it's in the listening. And if you know how to listen correctly, then you know exactly what you need to do to make life better for all at the same time.
One of the things that I found inspiring as it relates to this particular piece, there's a story that Cheryl Brayboy put together for the special. And she talks to some of the CMS students who wrote essays about Dr. King and his work. I mean, for me personally, I was 10 years old when he died. I was a student at a integrated fifth grade Catholic school. And I remember the eeriness the next morning after the news broadcast and going back to school, and there was kind of this feeling of emptiness on one hand, even in as much as the faculty members not necessarily knowing how to deal with the emotions. The emotions were very raw that next morning. But as it relates to Cheryl's piece, some of the writings of these CMS students are just remarkable, considering the fact that they never had this kind of exposure to activism, this kind of exposure, I guess, to the raw, visceral dialogue that was happening, you know, in this country as it related to race and social status and things like that. And the reality is that they could glean a lot of positive emotion and even kinds of things to shape their thinking and their attitudes as a result of the testimony of this man's life.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I think the special, like, is going to air on the 17th, is part of the reason that younger generations are aware of what happened and how they can form their actions going forward with this. And I think it's interesting that both of you mentioned it is a special that looks back on the past, but really what you hope comes out of it is change and progress in the future.
And the other thing too, and Dedrick can relate to this, I think when you look at where this community has come from the standpoint of where, you know, because of the pandemic and COVID, there's not going to be the parade, there's not going to be the wreath laying. And we kind of flash back to some of those years of celebration within this particular piece. But the fact of the matter is that, you know, it kind of began as a very small grassroots kind of an organization, you know, going back some 20, 30 years or so ago, and morphed into this community-wide breakfast and parades and, you know, the whole adage of a day on far as community projects and just civil engagement. So in that regard, I think that folks in this community and even in this part of the country have a lot to be proud of as it relates to the way that this holiday has grown, not only in terms of the awareness, but also moving people forward in many respects as it relates to understanding what Dr. King and his work in this particular movement was about.
Yeah, and I'm also encouraged, and I'm glad you brought that up, Maddie, with the young people. I'm encouraged that the young people, they do know what Dr. Martin Luther King was all about. They do know his story, and that is propelled them to be leaders. In Cheryl's piece, you know, she's asking, you know, do you want to be a leader? Here in 2022, we need more Martins. We need more Coretta Scott Kings. We need more people who are going to stand up for truth. Fast forward to today, we are still fighting some of the same fights that Dr. Martin Luther King was fighting when he was alive. And talking to the leaders said that, hey, we've come a long way, but look, folks, we still have a long way to go. And the mayor said that if Dr. Martin Luther King was alive today, that he would probably be pressing the leaders and say, hey, why haven't you gotten what you need to get done? What is the holdup? And I think that, Dr. Martin Luther King, he preached unity, and maybe, this will be a time where we can come together, whether black, white, male, female, no matter where you are. We need to come together to make life better for all. And also in this series, we're going to celebrate. I always learned that it's nice to be nice. We're going to celebrate those people who are living out the dream. We have the Growing the Dream Award, the Keeper of the Dream, the Medallion Award. We are going to be awarding our community, people who live right here in Charlotte, those awards who are doing what they need to do to make sure that that their life is better and that freedom comes for all.
The other side of that, though, is there's a piece that you'll see from Abby Tedros in this particular special. And she sits down with two people pretty much the same age, same demographic, one being a black male, Ron Leeper, former Charlotte City Council member, Diane English, who is just a unilateral voice in many ways with her community building initiative. And they are both, I guess, products of the 60s in that regard and in their 70s. And Ron Leeper makes, in what I would call a very profound statement, he says, why is it and I'm paraphrasing here, why is it I'm 76 years old and I'm still fighting for the same things that I fought for when I was, say, 26 years old? And I think that becomes one of those, I guess, clarion themes from the standpoint of where, again, the issue of voting rights, civil liberties, leveling the playing field, that in some regards, even though there were people that lost their lives in the 1960s and demonstrated just all kinds of sacrifices, that we still have to come full circle, 50, 60 years later and still deal with those issues that we've seen as it relates to protests in the street, and even in as much as some of the legislation that we have on a local and federal level.
I think this special is honest, and I think it's real, and I think both of you should be proud of what we are all going to be able to see on the 17th. So I appreciate you explaining a little bit more about it.
But it's going to be a great time, and I'm all about family, right? This is a special where you can get all the family, no matter the age, and sit around and watch this hour-long special. And I believe that after you watching the special, that you will leave inspired, you will leave empowered, and you should leave with the assignment of the day. What do you need to do in order to continue King's dream and make King's dream a reality sooner rather than later?
But I think in some regards too, what Dedrick speaks to is the fact that there is a sense of enlightenment that perhaps we see as a community in trans and race and economic status and the like, from the standpoint of where, okay, this is where we are as a community. Here are some of the things that we've experienced from one point to another. And so how do we collectively grow in bridging the gap, in bridging our understanding, and perhaps finding ways that we can more or less progress collectively as a community and get rid of some of the dysfunction that is out there.
And you can watch the Atrium Health Charlotte-Mecklenburg Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. National Holiday Special Celebration. It is airing live on WBTV News on Monday. That is January 17th. And you can watch it at 7 o'clock. It is an hour-long special. Once again, we already are releasing content for our streaming services about this special, pieces that both Dedrick and Steve have worked on for months now to make available to you. And you can find those wherever you stream WBTV News, wherever you're watching right now, whether that is Roku, Amazon Fire, or Apple TV. You can also find those videos and those stories on WBTV's YouTube channel.